Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this mentoring session of this UASIS Graduate Forum conference. Well, my name is Carlos Bravo Laguna. I'm a pre-doctoral researcher at the Boston Institute of International Studies and Pompeu Fabra University, but I'm talking to you at the moment from Tübingen in Germany. We have here four excellent speakers to whom I feel very, very grateful for accepting our invitation to join this mentoring session. We have four speakers here. I will start with Professor Simon Usherwood, who since May 2021 has been Professor of Politics and International Studies at the Open University. He's also visiting research fellow at the Center for Britain and Europe at the University of Surrey. And previously, he has been Deputy Director of the United Kingdom in a Change in Europe initiative. And well, from September 2021, Simon will become chair of UASIS. So congratulations on that. Next, we also have Professor Roberta Guerrina. Thank you actually twice, because you've attended also our keynote session, Roberta, so thank you so much. She's a professor at the University of Bristol and director of the Gender Research Center in the School of Sociology, Politics and International Studies. She's currently the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer for UASIS and co-editor of the Journal of Common Market Studies Annual Review. In 2020-2021, she's also the chair of the Feminist Theory and Gender section of the International Studies Association. Her work examines how gender norms and structures influence new politics and policies. So at the moment, she's researching the gendered impact of crisis, Brexit and COVID-19, gender and leadership, gender mainstreaming in foreign and security policy, and feminist research methodologies. Actually, I didn't mention this, but Simon has, or Professor Simon Usherwood, rather, has been most recently, Simon goes, okay, has most recently been focusing on UK-EU relations and the Brexit process. Next, we have Dr. Kathryn Simpson. Thank you again for being here. She is a senior lecturer in political economy and program leader of economics, as well as the deputy director of the Manchester Jean Monnet Center of Excellence. She's an expert on in comparative European politics, Brexit, political behavior, and public opinion. Primarily, her research covers the link between public attitudes to inequality and to the EU in the context of economic crisis. She's an elected executive member and trustee of UASIS, board member of the Manchester Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, and series editor of the European Politics series, published by Manchester University Press. Thank you so much for being here. And then we have Dr. Benjamin Leruth. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your last name. So Professor Benjamin Leruth is an assistant professor in politics and society, specializing in comparative politics and welfare policy, Euroscepticism, democratic innovations, and differentiated European integration and disintegration at the University of Groningen. He's also the European Languages and Cultures Program Coordinator since 2020 and coordinator of the university-wide Democracy and Governance Research Group since 2021. So, well, without further ado, here I have a list of questions that we have prepared in advance. I will ask them again. 8 to 10 minutes for each question would be wonderful. If you feel that you have anything that you would like to comment related to the questions, now I'm speaking to the speakers, please raise your hand and I will give you the floor. So first question, you know that here our audience at the UASIS Graduate Forum recently expanded. Only has pre-doctoral researchers and also early career researchers. We also now have master's students as well. So my first question here for you would be, how could prospective candidates identify good or bad doctors?
Choosing a is a very difficult question, and I think for all of us who have been through that process, whether recently or less recently. In my case, it's something that is a very individual kind of journey that people go through. I think the things that I would look for are, first of all, that supervisory relationship that you have. I think that the single best bit of advice that I got at the start of my PhD was that you're in a three-way relationship when you do a doctorate. It's you, your supervisor, and the thesis itself, and that carries on until one of them expires, hopefully the thesis. And if that relationship isn't there, if it's not working, if you're not connecting well with your supervisor, then everything else becomes that much more difficult. So I think identifying individuals rather than simply programs, I think, is a crucial part of what you need to be doing. I think secondly, it's also a question of thinking about the environment and the groups that you might be joining. Are you joining a large unit that's specialized in your area, or is it a more broad-based kind of approach that's kind of in the disciplinary field, but means connecting with people outside of area? So for me, and I guess also for Ben, I did my PhD on Euroscepticism starting in the late 90s, and nobody did research on Euroscepticism at that point. So there wasn't really a community I could join. And so I joined a pretty large group of people at LSE, at their European Institute, who had tangentially useful insights and knowledge, but it was left really to me to build a kind of a close community with people through UASIS, and that was one of the key reasons why I've stayed with it for so long and why it's been so useful. So think about the connections within the institution that are there, because whilst it's good to be reaching out and building a network, and sessions like this I think are really helpful, if you have somebody who's in the same study room or in the same department, that makes it that much easier to have those conversations that are good for your intellectual development amongst your peers. So I think for me that's part of what to look for. I think finally, just is it the kind of place that works for you in a more general sense? Like it is with your undergraduate and your master's degree, you're spending more time outside the classroom than in. So are you in a place that you like, that you respond well to, that is good for your work-life balance and everything else that's important in your life? And that's particularly true in a doctoral program. And if you've got those things coming together, then I think that's all well and good. I'll leave someone else to talk about the money side of it, because that turns out to actually be quite important. But for me, I think those are the kind of really good things to be thinking about at this stage.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's really great to hear this, because indeed happiness is something that not a lot of people talk about, but it's crucial at all stages of your life, of course. Thanks for saying this. I don't know if anyone else would like to, has anything that would like to say besides what Simon just mentioned.
I'll just jump in. The other thing that I will say, it's research training. Most doctoral programs now include fairly significant research training as part of the doctoral experience. However, the quality of the research training that is offered in-house can be quite variable. So what I would also encourage you to do is to look at the opportunity that are offered internally to sign up for research training, which is part of the doctoral, often is part of the doctoral program or the doctoral college at your institution. But also if there is funding within the PGR program for you to access externally provided research training. Range of opportunities, both that are thematic. So you have excellent summer schools that focus specifically on issue, which will also include a bit of research training and methods in there, but also specific methodology summer schools and winter schools, such as the ones organized by ECPR. Research training is absolutely key to success as an academic, but also for those of you who choose to not pursue an academic career. Even though PhDs don't just lead to academic careers. So research training in both qualitative and quantitative methods, using different tools that are available for both approaches, I think is going to be key to the success of any future PhD student.
this indeed brings me memories of our doctoral training academy when we hear about improving our transferable skills in order to make us more employable, of course. Thank you so much for that. For all of you, what advice would you give to either doctoral students seeking a career in academia or to early career researchers that are looking to continue in academia?
Obviously, like, I'm going to draw on my own experience as well. It's important to realize that one's experience may differ completely from the other. There are a lot of factors that come into play, like personal circumstances, the timing as well, and so on. But the key advice that I would give, and that's not only for those who are looking to go ahead once they finish their PhD in academia, but in life in general, is to set some clear boundaries on what you are ready to do for your academic career, because we do hear so many more people who suffer from a burnout after a while because they want to do as much as possible to demonstrate that they are an essential part of the puzzle, especially when they are a postdoctoral researcher or a teaching fellow on a very precarious contract. And unfortunately, that's what we are noticing now with the marketization of higher education, neoliberal university. So setting up boundaries, and it's very much linked to happiness, is absolutely essential. The other part that is quite important, that's based on my own experience, is not to give up and not to despair if you get rejections. Before I got my first job, I applied for 87 jobs, both in academia and outside of academia. So the moment I submitted my thesis, before my Viva, I was like, okay, I'm going to look at what's available right now. I applied to be an assistant to members of the European Parliament. I applied for think tanks. I also applied for jobs that I was not necessarily interested in, but that would give me the experience of maybe having an interview so that I would be even more ready for a position that I really want to have. So not despairing and like sending your CV, sending obviously not a default cover letter, but personalized cover letters is absolutely essential in there. And yeah, eventually there will be like an opportunity to get the interview. You should, when you get an interview for a job that you really like, do not stress out. See this as a valuable conversation between people who may become your colleagues and friends. You are not talking to your future boss. You're not talking to like strangers. It has to be a good fit for them, but also for you. I was in a situation, a rather fortunate situation at some point in my career where I had like different job interviews and I got a job offered, but I felt that it was not a good match. And I declined this position because I felt that I was not going to be a good fit and that the people who wanted to hire me would be disappointed at the end of the day. So it is a two-way street here. So communication is absolutely essential, not despairing, flexibility to a certain extent, as much flexibility as you can have. Of course, you should never sacrifice what is absolutely essential in your life, especially personal circumstances, your family and all. They should always come first. So a certain degree of flexibility is also quite important. So these are the points that I would mention as the most important in my view.
Thank you so much. I will abuse before handing over the floor of my privilege as a chair, just to say that yes, indeed, this is really key. I mean, I'm close to finishing my PhD, and I recently did a job interview for a postdoctoral position, and I asked someone, what advice could you give me for this interview? And I expected something more, I don't know, like do your homework, get everything ready. I mean, the professor that I asked, she told me, be natural in the interview, and this will be key to cause a good impression. And yeah, really, I felt more comfortable and less pressured to do a good job. And yeah, So now I think Kathryn has some reactions.
I would absolutely agree wholeheartedly with what Ben has said. And again, I'll my experience kind of peppered throughout all my responses. And I've only, despite being from Ireland, I've actually only ever experienced the UK job market. But I think exactly what you said as well, Carlos, about hiring committees as well are looking for kind of a good fit. They're not looking for perfection. And they're looking for a candidate who would fit well within the department or the research centre. And this is obviously in relation to the research that you will contribute, but maybe also your teaching expertise as well. And as I say, they do not have to be perfect. You need to show willing to be flexible, to know how your skills and how those skills can be shaped and contribute to within others within that department or that institution or that research centre. You could be the start of a new research cluster, for example, or a new teaching area, but they're also looking for a likability factor. I recently sat on a hiring committee about a month ago for 2 permanent lectureships within my department. We had 140 applications for 2 positions at MMU, which was intense, I can tell you, a very tough shortlisting process. But at the end of the day, when we were interviewing, you want to come across as natural, as personable and true to yourself. And when you do, you get a feel for people and you go a little bit on instinct. It is not just about kind of, ticking every box. And I think that the difficulty is probably getting past the shortlisting stage. Because that is where it's very comparable, it's black and white, and I have some thoughts on that and we can come to it later. But once you get past that, be yourself, relax, and again, as I say, that let your personality shine through, because the hiring committee as well want to know that they can work with you. It's really, really important. I think we sometimes forget that in the kind of the bluster and hustle of how difficult and how competitive a job market is at present.
Thank you so much. So Roberta, please, over to you.
Yeah, a couple of things. So a couple of comments about the job market. But when it comes to the application process and then the interview process, what you need to be clear about is if you're going into a department, are you going to be a culture fit or are you going to be a culture add? Are you going to actually, is this a department which is fairly homogeneous and is looking for people who fit within that mold? Or, and if that's the case, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, because what they might actually be looking for is someone who is different in in terms of the research that they do, their teaching approach, their personality, diversity in the broadest possible sense, right? But you need to be aware of those kind of softer elements of the interview process, right? And be mindful of that as you're interviewing, but also be true to you. Have to work there. You will inevitably will have to make compromises wherever you work. But are those the kind of compromises that you're prepared to make? Process of the job is something that it's relational, right? And you need to decide how much of yourself and your life are you prepared to give to this profession. And that takes my second point, which is academia is greedy. The academy is incredibly greedy. There's always one more article you can write. There's always one more thing that you can do. And what are you prepared to sacrifice or not? But then, what are the decisions and what are the implications? Those are personal decisions. And we are not here to judge or to guide, because those are entirely personal decisions. But you need to be aware that those kind of decisions will have implications for your work-life balance and, going back to what Carlos was saying, the happiness front, right? But it may be what makes you happy. And there will be times in which you say, actually, it's good enough to be just good enough right now for whatever reason, right? And that's perfectly fine. And moment for me to really put my research right up there. And my voice, careers go up and down, and that's absolutely normal. And actually, that's how it should be. It makes you better.
I see a lot of nodding here, so I see that everyone is on the same boat in this. Okay, excellent. I don't know if there is any other points that you would like to make regarding this aspect. Otherwise, it's good to see that you've already kind of jumping next to other questions that we had here in mind. You've already talked a little bit about selection committees, hiring committees, and job interviews. I was wondering, besides what has already been said, if you could share with us something related to the aspects that hiring committees would take into account when assessing candidates for a postdoctoral position. Yes, Simon first, and then Kathryn.
I think we've covered a lot of it. I think in terms of when you receive applications, one thing that still so few people do is actually speak explicitly to the criteria that you have set out in the job application. I can't start to think of the number of times I've opened a generic letter, sometimes with the name of another university that they're really passionate about working at, or just, even when it's addressed actually to you correctly, it's just a general letter of here are the wonderful things I do, rather than just working through. If you can do that, that shows that you've actually engaged with the post, and it makes it much easier for the evaluator to get you through that shortlisting stage. The second thing, again, is about being yourself, and I think the being yourself point is it's about fairness. It's fairness to the people employing you, that they know you are what you say you are. And I think in the past I have encountered people who turned out to be quite different from how they interviewed. Let's say that. But it's also fair on yourself. You have to work with these people, and if you sell yourself as one thing, but that's not who you are, that also takes a toll on you, and your mental engagement in the broadest sense with the work that you do. So a lot of it is about just that honesty and genuine enthusiasm for the post that you want. I always say apply for jobs that you want to do, that you conceivably want to do, because I think that's another problem that you sometimes see. It's more at senior levels where people apply for jobs as a way of trying to improve their position at their home institution, so they can say, oh, I've got a job offer from somewhere else, give me a raise. And all of this kind of game playing, which I'm sure none of you would do, none of us would do, but is certainly out there, does come with a cost at some point. At some point, people will talk about that kind of behavior, and it reflects badly on yourself. So in terms of just thinking about your general career progression, not just in academia but more generally, you acquire an image and a profile over time, and some of that's under your control. A lot of it's under your control, but some of it isn't. But the stuff that's under your control, you have to be conscious about how you might be seen by others. Think about the stories you hear about colleagues at other places, at other stages in their careers, and how fair are those representations? And it's something that I think you have to be very conscious of. It may be that you don't mind what people think of you, or you want to have a particular kind of image, but if you're worried about the cost that might come with that, then use the opportunities you have to portray the image that you feel is more accurate and more favorable to yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, just to kind of build upon what Simon has said, I also think you should assess job advertisements. And I don't think anybody should dwell on a job title. Don't think you have to tick every box, or don't think that job is suitable or unsuitable to you. The best advice that I got when I was on the job market post-PhD was, if you see yourself doing that job, apply. And actually, in my experience, the jobs that I believed I was less suited for were the jobs that I was shortlisted for and the jobs that I was appointed to. And that still stands to today. So my first position was a research associate in British politics. And I'm now a senior lecturer in political economy. None of which, in terms of title, I never, ever would have aligned myself to, but I have still progressed and I've still maintained true to myself, but also to my research area, and built upon kind of the research within the departments that I've sat in. So I think that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing as well is that you need to stand out at that shortlisting stage, because that is actually the hardest, as I mentioned previously. So if the job application invites formal questions or queries to a member of staff, email them, because you're putting your name out there and on the radar to the selection committee, so they know who you are, they know who to look out for when they're going through 140 applications. That's not to say that you're going to be shortlisted, but equally a conversation with a hiring committee member can also give you the understanding of, is this somewhere I want to work? Is this the job that I want to do? As opposed to spending a whole load of time applying for a job that maybe in hindsight might not be a good fit for you. For example, exactly what Ben said at the beginning about he turned down a job because it wasn't a good fit. Don't be afraid to do that either. And that would maximize your time. And it's not a lost exercise by any shape or form. I also think as well, this touches with Simon's comment, is that write a cover letter, even if it's not a requirement. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you've gone through the job detail or the job spec in detail. And I've got some notes on this that I won't elaborate here, but I can put them in the chat box about what should be in it. And get your mentor or your PhD supervisor to look over it before you submit it, and make sure you have included the best version of yourself in there, because in particular, women really undersell themselves at this stage. I was absolutely astounded when I was part of my first hiring committee, as I say, only in the last couple of months, how differently both genders apply themselves and sell themselves at that stage. It is stark. So I would really encourage female colleagues in particular to kind of reach out in that perspective and consider that. And I'm sure Roberta will have a lot more input on this as well.
So much, Kathryn, and please do so. Include this information on the cover letter in the chat. I'm sure everyone will appreciate this. So I think Benjamin had his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Yeah, I'd like to second everything that Kathryn had said already, especially since I think that our career paths are quite similar, that the jobs that we ended up having were not necessarily the ones that we felt we were more suited for. Like for me, I did my PhD on different city integration and Euroscepticism, and I ended up being a postdoc on social policy. And I was like shortlisted. I think there were like 110 applicants. There were 4 people shortlisted. I was surprised to be shortlisted, to be honest, but I really liked the project. And then during the job interview, I was basically being 100% honest. I said, if you are looking for a scholar or an emerging scholar of social policy, I'm not that guy. But if you're looking for someone who is willing to become more multidisciplinary and who can bring something of maybe added value, something out of the box to the project, then I'm here. So that was my selling point. It ended up working quite well for me. I'd like to add something to one of the latest things that Kathryn mentioned when it comes to especially the gender dimension of getting a job. If you are lucky enough to get a job, and especially for women here, and you get an offer, negotiate that offer. Say that you would like to negotiate your salary or the conditions of your employment, even if it is your first job. Because unfortunately, there are many universities where women will get a lower salary than a man for exactly the same position. Negotiate it, you have absolutely nothing to lose, and you are most likely going to get an offer that is slightly higher than the initial offer. So I think that the risk of saying, I'd like to negotiate my salary is very, very low, and you should go for that.
Kathryn, please go ahead.
I fully agree with what Ben has said there. And again, we know each other through our time in the UAC's Graduate Forum. So this is really quite exciting to be part of this panel today. And it comes to the next question, well, I'm sure we'll talk about network. But just on the point of what Ben has said about knowing your worth, I think he's absolutely right. But I would also encourage people to be sensible on this. So in terms of kind of, no one wants to find themselves taking a pay cut, from maybe say going from a research associate to a lecturer. You should see a clear monetary increase, and especially when it's a step up. But equally, do not ask for a £10,000 increase on your current salary with relocation costs from a different city that's maybe only 10 miles away. Because again, personal experience very, very recently, we had 2 candidates who were on fixed term contracts who asked for quite high increases of salary and turned down the positions based on salary as well, which I did find quite surprising. But I would say that Ben does have a point. Know your worth, know where you can fit in, but equally be realistic and sensible about what that is as well.
Roberta.
I'll come in on that, and actually, yes, leaning in can have its advantages, but as a wholesale critic of the whole lean-in agenda, I should also point out a note of caution which Kathryn has already started to articulate. Knowing your worth also means when it's time to walk away from a job or a job offer. Okay, so that is something that you need to be aware of. And it goes back to the discussion that we had before. What are the kind of compromises that you're prepared to make for a particular job? And that relates to knowing your worth. When I was head of department, the single biggest disappointment, it was when someone we made an offer to turned us down in the end for a temporary position in a lower level temporary position in a different country, because that's where they wanted to relocate to. And they are flying now. And that's because they knew their worth, and they knew that this would be just a temporary setback, because they had a very clear idea of what they wanted to achieve with their life more broadly than just their academic job, right? So that is something that you need to bear in mind. And second, yes, negotiate. And for women, absolutely negotiate. But as I'm assuming it's not just women who are here, for men, don't overestimate your worth, because in my experience, it is mostly men who ask a £10,000 pay increase, and to which you have to say, no. And you don't want to say when you're negotiating with someone, say, actually, you're not worth that much. But that's essentially what you're pushing people to do. So this is a call also on institution, and I know this is an early career researcher forum, but we as institution also need to be realistic. And part of the reason why there is a gender pay gap is not just that women don't negotiate, is that sometimes we're too easy to give other people who do negotiate, mostly men, white men in particular, what they ask. So know your worth, because there are increasingly people sitting on interview panels like me who will say, not really, because there is another 4 people on the short list who are just as good as you are. And this is not to say that you shouldn't have that conversation and that discussion, but be aware that the market is incredibly strong. I've just appointed a part-time research associate for one of my projects, and the depth of the candidates was incredible. So yes, negotiate. That's when you have the power to do so, when you get the job offer, but also appreciate that the sector is under crisis at the moment. There are limits to what institutions and heads of departments can do, and also understand the limits of what is reasonable and possible.
Thank you so much. Again, I'm gonna briefly abuse my position as to ask you a very related question here, because we're talking already about the magic word, money. So when is it acceptable to talk about money in a selection process? Would you say only when you are negotiating, while once you've already got the job offer, is it acceptable to discuss this in an interview? Yes, Kathryn and Roberta. So
I certainly, every institution has its own different process in terms of its application. So I know at MMU, you are asked to provide what salary you would like when you're applying for the job. So that's the first kind of indication. Sometimes we looked at it, sometimes we didn't. But I would never discuss salary in an interview, number one, because that is being very presumptuous that you're going to be appointed. I think it's once you get a phone call to say that you're appointable, I think that would be the appropriate stage. And again, with the head of department or with the hiring committee, but that would be the approach that I would take, and the one that I've been so familiar with so far.
I don't know if Roberta had the same answer. Or
Yeah.
wanted to...
Now, a couple of things. Things not to do in interviews. Ask about your first research leave. Those are things that you can negotiate and discuss. Okay, so those are all things that I have experienced, and Simon and I have sat on several interview panels together. So he's laughing, so he knows exactly what I'm referring to. So do not ask about your first research leave as your first question at an interview panel. Do not ask about the salary as your second or first question in an interview panel. You can talk money once you've been offered the job. I would actually negotiate everything else first. And that's normally what I do. I negotiate conditions, start date. At that point, I say research leave, teaching loads, and then we talk salaries. I fully appreciate that I'm at a different career stage, but I think those softer issues, if you get those negotiated first, and if you go down fairly significantly down the route of negotiating the start and everything else, that's also then a good place to start talking about salaries, because it means that the institution is also invested in appointing you, because it means that they have delayed contacting the other candidates. So, it's at that point, it's about game playing, but not during the interview. And also, I would suggest that you do all of this with HR rather than your future head of department, who in all likelihood is going to be your line manager, because you don't want that to actually undermine your future relationship with the person that you're going to be working with, both as a colleague, but also as a line manager.
Okay, thank you so much. This is incredibly interesting. Simon, do you have something? Yes?
Talking about the money in an interview also gives the impression that you want this job for the money rather than because you're interested in the work. And again, coming back to what we talked about, we're looking for people who are intellectually and personally engaged in the work, that people who are on the same kind of wavelength. Most academics aren't doing this for the money, unless they go into management. But even then, it's not, the intellectual endeavor is what we're looking for the connection with. And if somebody comes in, it feels like that they're just here because they want to pay the bills, then it raises a question about their commitment and their engagement with what you're trying to do. So yeah, you leave it till later. So again, it's about the impression that you're projecting about what value, what you value in all of this.
Thank you very much. Talking about already money, so let's stick to this topic. Talking about PhD students who may lack funding from their own department, can you think about any alternative financial opportunities? Because of course, everyone is lucky enough to have a scholarship, and maybe there are any sources that you could point them to that could be interesting. If you have anything to say on this end. Benjamin, yeah, please. Or yeah, Benjamin, Ben, I don't know, Dr. Leruth. I don't
Ben,
know.
yeah, no, Ben is perfect, really.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think I'm quite well suited to answer that question because I was a self-funded PhD student. I really wanted to do a PhD, like during my master's program. I was like, yeah, I really want to give it a shot to academia, even if at the end of the day I end up not working in academia. I think that doing a PhD is what would work well for me. So I did apply for different doctoral programs. None of them had scholarships attached to this. So I knew that I would have to work on the side. And that's what I did for the first year. So I had a part-time job, but I knew that it was not going to work out for the second year. So from the first semester onwards, together with my supervisor, who is Professor David Howarth, who is now based at the University of Luxembourg, we identified some funding streams for visiting fellowships, for like 1-year contract with research councils, for instance, as well as some academic associations and societies as well. So you have some in the UK, well, you have the Liver Hume Trust, for instance, you have obviously the SRC. But in my case, because my research was on the Nordic countries, I applied for a 1-year fellowship at the Research Council of Norway to go for 1 year at the University of Oslo. And that's how I got funded for my second year. I knew that it was not solving the problem for the remainder of my PhD program. So I kept on looking around. I talked to quite a lot of people to see whether they knew any associations that could help me out. I did get some money here and there, some small funding streams to fund my research stays in Sweden and Finland, for instance. Googling, obviously, Google is your best friend, at least for searching, not for privacy matters. But you do find quite a lot of information online on relevant funding streams. And then what I did, and that works quite well for some people, so some self-funded people as well, if you are lucky enough to be at a university, department, or even institute that has a little bit of money aside for side jobs such as publishing, like editing, or obviously like doing a little bit of teaching, or even commissioning reports on specific matters as part of a big research project, please put your name out there. Say that you are well suited to produce a report on a specific element of a funded project. Is there a little bit of money aside to help you with the rest of your PhD program, and in return you would produce this? That's what worked for me. So my third year was funded by the University of Oslo because I produced a report on party positions towards European integration in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. So it's all about being creative when you are self-funded. It's all about trying to find help where it's possible to get it. Do not make the mistake that I made, which is not looking at how trustworthy some of these charities, trusts, or associations can be. I almost fell in the trap that would have linked me to a populist radical right political party. So do your research and do ask around to make sure that these potential third-party funders or small contributors to your programs have a right reputation that will not harm your future career within or outside academia.
Simon.
Exactly the same experience for me. I also was funded. I think the only difference was that I got knocked off my bicycle one day, and the insurance payout from the lorry supported me for a few months. I'm not at all recommending that because it was really quite painful. But I got to go in an ambulance, so that was nice. I think that the flip side of that is that all of this takes up a lot of time and effort. I know it did for me. I'm guessing it did for Ben as well, in terms of, you know, the demands of doing other things. And I think that's always the challenge for self-funded students is, what's the impact on your studying? And I find it more and more that I think talking to self-funded students who come to talk to me about doing doctorates, I think there's often an image that they might be able to just find someone who will give them all the money that they need, that's job done. Whereas, it's much more likely that it's going to be a bit here, a bit there. The other alternative is that you go down a more part-time route, that you carry on kind of a more steady job. I have one student who has taken that to quite extensive lengths. I think they're coming up for a decade now of registration, because they've had a very large amount of work at different points, and that's been really difficult for them. So I think always, you have to have a frank conversation with your supervisor before you start on that path. Your supervisor will have a good sense of what is realistic institutionally, in disciplinary terms, what might be options, but ultimately it falls on you to sort that out. So I think you have to be sure that that's the right option for you, that works, even more so than doing a PhD generally. The question of why do you want to do a PhD applies so much more for self-funded students. So it's about recognizing what additional burden comes with that, and sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you get unlucky, but lucky in a cash payout way. You have to think again about how you will respond to that and how difficult that might be, because PhDs at the best of times are not stress-free propositions, so you have to keep that in mind.
Definitely. And before moving on to the next point, I wanted to tell our audience here that UASIS itself also, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are bursaries available for researchers that want to do field work. So please go ahead and apply, because it's also a useful resource. So actually, I will move on to the next question. Now, networking. To what extent does a network of contacts matter in your academic career?
Simon had his hand up before me. Hey-ho. Thank you, Simon. It's a really short answer, quite frankly. It means a lot, and it's invaluable. It's as simple as that. It will be part of any job application, whether it's in a formal capacity, as stated kind of in a cover letter, or whether it's informally within the interview, by kind of how your academic citizenship and that shaping that. Academia is also, as I'm sure most of you have now started to gather, is very small, and it's especially small in EU studies. Your reputation will go before you, even if you don't know it. You could find yourself being interviewed by someone from your network, someone who has chaired a panel at a conference, or someone you've sat on a conference panel with. I think of my own network and my own experience in the job market. The one job I applied for and I was shortlisted for that was outside of academia, which was a job at the FCO as a European analyst. A member of the interview panel was an academic, was my ad hoc kind of mentor, and who taught me as an undergraduate student. Now, I didn't get the job, and I'm still very friendly with this person, so it's okay. But what I'm trying to get to the point is that it's very, very small, and you need to protect your network, and you need to kind of really build it around you. But also, you will get to know about up and coming opportunities as well. So these could be senior academics or mid-career academics who may have a research associate or assistant position as part of a large research grant. That might be one way. That's how you might find out about it before you see it on jobs.ac.uk or Twitter or wherever. And this also kind of goes back to the point that which I feel is a bit of a theme for the session really, is be true to yourself. It is a very tough job market, and perseverance is key. And you need to self-reflect upon those unsuccessful applications as well. But when you stay true to yourself and you create that network, your reputation will go before you in a good way, and it'll become genuine, and people will know that you're on the job market. People will know where you can fit, and you would be very, very surprised at how many opportunities can come up as a part of that. My network has been absolutely fundamental to my research career, but also getting me through some of those very, very difficult times in the early stages of my career, and in particular UACs. As I said previously, Ben and I know each other from our time in the graduate forum as PhD researchers. But one of the key things that pulled me through and was a golden thread when I was at a pretty dark place at the beginning of my career and academic career and post PhD was being part of the editorial team of JASER and working with members of UACs there, and they were phenomenal. Their support was absolutely invaluable. So again, being genuine and being true to yourself also stands well to in your network as well.
Yeah, it's all the things that Kathryn said. Even if I did my PhD at LSE, as I said, which is not an insignificant centre for social science research. I met many, many more people working at LSE on relevant topics through networks and events like UASIS Graduate Forum events and other conferences than I ever did at LSE. So even where you've got lots of people nearby, doesn't necessarily mean you meet them. So networks are really, really important. I was just, as Kathryn was saying about people in the audience, I was just looking through the list of people, and I know about a third of you, whether you realize it or not. And I'm thinking about why I know you. And it's mainly because of the networks and your engagement and participation in different kinds of events and the kind of contributions that you make on different kind of things. So it's good for that resilience that Kathryn talked about, and I've certainly had the same at different points. It's good for opening opportunities in terms of employment, in terms of publications. When people, let's say I'm thinking about a special issue, who am I looking at? Okay, I'm looking at the literature, but also I'm thinking, well, I know so-and-so will write a piece of work on time and to a good standard. I know that, they're kind of sympathetic to a particular kind of agenda that we're trying to work on. So it's good for those kind of things. It's good for being involved in research funding at the point that you get to those kind of things. And again, it's about managing your profile and your reputation and building those kind of networks of mutual support and development. And yeah, I can't, as Emily's saying in the comments, that's also about the people who work in professional associations. They also really matter. I've seen some really positive stories of UASIS and the office helping individuals achieve things that they weren't able to do otherwise, and that comes through that kind of networking opportunity. And I'm particularly aware that at the moment, in a socially distanced age, there are fewer opportunities, which makes it all the more important that you use things like this to start making those metaphorically face-to-face connections with people, which will come back and will help you in the long run. And it's not about it all paying off straight away. It's about people disappear from your radar for a while and then they pop up where you don't expect them, and it's like, oh, well, there's somebody I know, and that's really helpful.
This reminds me of one thing that happened to me last September. There was this workshop organized by one person that I met in the UASIS Graduate Forum about my actual topic. And it included one-to-one meetings with some of the more established professors attending. So I am talking to this person, and suddenly the name of one guy that I had read a lot about comes into the picture, and he says, "Why don't you go ahead and email him?" And I say, "I really don't know him. No, he will be fine. He's really a nice person, and we'll be happy to talk to you. And we even ended up having a 30-minute Skype interview about, I mean, at the beginning he was like, okay, but why do you want to talk to me? And I said, well, I mean, my research is really related to you. I just don't have any underlying interest. But then he wasn't the nicest person. So, I mean, I'm not sure to what extent it's advisable to go and email people out of the blue, but definitely I thought it was beneficial, given that it's so difficult for PhD students now to interact with more established people because we don't have in-person conferences. So I decided to go out of my comfort zone and not be shy in that end. Okay, I don't know if you have any other say about this point. Otherwise, we go to the next question. Yes.
The only other thing that, sorry, Carlos, the only other thing that I would like to add in terms of the networks and why they're so important, and it links to the job market. Your networks will be able to flag or let you know of jobs that are likely to come up before they are even advertised, because those kind of things are disseminated through networks ahead of the formal publications, because a lot of people who are involved in the on the recruitment side will talk to others to say, you know, if you have PhD students who might be interested in these kind of things, or early career researchers, or even mid-career researchers, they will kind of start putting out feelers before the jobs are actually formally advertised. So networks are important at all levels of your career, but also at all levels of your academic experience, if nothing else, because they keep you sane. Especially when things go wrong.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so
sorry,
now,
Carlos, I should also say they help you celebrate when things go right? Because it's not just when things go wrong. So those are the people you can go out drinking with when you get a grant, when you get a job, when you get your PhD, and all those wonderful things.
yes. Well, thank you so much. We have a few comments in the chat already. First of all, about the networking session that might take place after this, which we will get to that at the end of the panel. But also, we had a comment from Nelly Kirilova supporting the happiness argument. The network is not a product, but people. And people, you know, when social ones, I mean, as I am, we are definitely happy to have people to talk about, to talk to. Yes, Simon.
Yeah, strange thing is that academics are people, and like most people, they're actually, you know, nice enough. You know, yes, not everyone's nice, but not everyone's nice. But I know hardly anyone in academia who wouldn't be happy to have a conversation with a grad student or an ECR if they approached them. You know, so, and you know, this morning I've done 2 interviews for dissertation students from random institutions, and I've done that because it's in my area, but also because it's important to show the engagement and about opening up pathways for those people who are coming through. So, you know, the more senior colleagues also have a self-interested motive for supporting younger colleagues, you know, colleagues earlier in their career development, because it's the lifeblood of the profession. That if we aren't supporting people coming through, showing them why we have stuck with it, then, you know, we're cutting off our noses to spite our faces. So, you know, both rationally and just purely personally, people are very happy to chat. And I know that when I was starting out, I was incredibly fortunate to get an unsolicited email from someone whose work I respected well, who just invited me over to their university. They brought me lunch. We talked about the topic because they'd heard that I was studying this and they were interested. And that was really good for kind of bringing me on and, you know, connecting me to some other people. And it's someone who I still am in regular contact with. So, you know, those kind of experiences can have really long-term consequences, and again, reassure you that this is a thing that you want to do and that is valuable as you go along. You know, it's an odd kind of career choice in that it's both professional, but it's also personal. You know, that the boundaries between work and not work are often blurred. You know, I'm sure we've all stood there of an evening, or you've laid there in bed and you've had a bright idea about how to crack the particular research conundrum that you have. And yeah, recognizing that that's part of it, I think is also useful. Some really great friendships have come out of networking, out of working with departments. Roberta, who was employed on the same job position as me many years ago, has become a very good friend, even when she was my boss, and telling me to go and apply for a better salary when I changed jobs. So it's not just men overselling themselves or women underselling themselves. All of those things come out of work, and just taking opportunities. And just people in the audience, I know there are a couple of people who I've had very extensive conversations with already about their professional development, and hopefully that's of use in different kind of ways and helps sustain them and helps develop them.
Thank you so much. Okay, we still have roughly half an hour of our session. I mean, we started a bit late, so I hope it's all right if we steal 5 minutes of your time after 4:30. Okay, we have here already one question from the audience, which is quite related to one question that we had already prepared. So I'm going to ask the two of them at the same time. So Preksha was asking, what advice would you give someone that is dealing with supervisor issues? I mean, of course, this is a main issue. I mean, she was also wondering whether UASIS could help in any way. Well, I'm not sure on that latter part, but definitely about the supervisor issues. I think this is quite important to hear from you because you have really a lot of experience. And related to the question that was related to it is, what is your best advice on maintaining good mental health in the academic world, especially this in view of this challenging year? Yes, Ben, please, and then Simon.
All right, thanks. Yeah, look, that's also something that is very close to my heart. Not that I've been personally affected by bad relationship with my supervisor, but my partner has, and it's been a very, very difficult experience for the two of us when she was a PhD student herself. So I think that it's something that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. You should not let it simmer. In general, there are good structure within universities to address problems with supervisors that are either not doing their job or not being professional. So you should definitely contact the relevant people as soon as possible. Obviously, I don't know the nature of the issue. It could be a supervisor is not doing the job properly, but ultimately, you have to be aware as PhD students that the PhD supervisor will get something out of it as well, out of the supervision. They do get, in some institutions, they get some time of teaching when they get a PhD student, or they can be eligible for promotions in some institutions as well. So they should not just sign up for being a supervisor and not doing the job afterwards. So that needs to be flagged as soon as possible with the relevant people within your department or school. When it comes to maintaining good mental health, I mean, it's especially difficult in those times with social distancing. The work-life balance can be very, very difficult to maintain, especially for those of you who may have small children or care duties as well. Being myself in that situation, I can tell you that there were a lot of downs over the past year. But what is very important, and that relates to the very first point that I mentioned during this session, is to set up your clear boundaries here. You have to find time for yourself. You should not live only through your work. There are many other very important matters in life. It's very difficult when you can't put an end to a working day. And in academia, unfortunately, like Roberta said, academia is very greedy and it's very difficult to set these boundaries. It requires a lot of work on yourself too. You should try to set up these boundaries. And if at any point you feel overwhelmed, overworked, close to a burnout, it might sound a bit cliche to say that, but it's not a failure to seek help. It's actually being very strong. You should talk about the difficulties that you may encounter with your network, with your friends, but also with your colleagues. Seeking help is absolutely essential when you feel overwhelmed, and therefore I would strongly encourage you to do that too. I did it myself when I was a PhD student. I did it myself like after during my postdoc years, because I felt quite overwhelmed. I could not set that boundary, and the help that I sought was incredibly useful and invaluable.
Thank you, Ben, for that. Simon, please.
Yeah, it's about, I think a key thing is communication. On the supervisory side, I think where I've seen problems, it's often been a lack of communication or a breakdown of communication, that one party is unable to articulate what it is that's a difficulty or a problem, and the other side doesn't respond, and that kind of goes both ways. You have to try and move things on. That the hope that things will sort themselves out is, I think, without exception, misguided. That you need to do something to move things on. So within your institution, there'll be a director of postgraduate studies who can be a person to talk to. There'll be other members of staff who you can talk to more informally. You might have a student representative who can kind of anonymize your comments. It's also about the network, though. It's about talking with fellow students in your institution, outside of your institution, talking about your personal networks as well, to provide that. And yeah, I think just keeping it bottled up is not a good solution. In my case, I had quite a few supervisors over my time for reasons that were nothing to do with me, but to do with things I'm not even going to get into. If we were in person, I'd say buy me a pint afterwards and I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, I was fortunate that I had some good networks, that I was able to talk with some other people to get around the issues that had arisen. But yeah, it's not uncommon, and it's not a sign that things have failed. It's that there's just something that needs addressing. So again, kind of treating it in a problem-solving kind of way is usually a good first step. Sometimes things can't be resolved, but at least you can give it a try. And that point about mental health is really important. Having something that isn't work really matters. I see still students whose whole life is consumed with their PhD, and that's understandable, but it's also not healthy in the long run. You need to have something else that interests you and engages you and motivates you, because if nothing else, at some point your PhD will come to an end one way or another, and if that's been your life, it just makes it that much harder to take the next step into what you want to do. And going back to think about applying for jobs, don't wait until you've finished your PhD. You need to think about it beforehand. Talking with your supervisors about what comes after is also a good way of kind of managing and thinking about what the PhD is for. And again, remember that, remember what you're doing a PhD for. You're not doing it just to be called doctor, although I have met students who are just wanting to be called doctor. You're doing it because it's a subject that interests you, that it's a gateway to another step of your career or your intellectual development in whatever way. So yeah, just remember that, and it helps keep a sense of perspective with all of these things. But talk to people.
On mental health, and then I'm going to fold it into also one of the questions that's in the chat as well about the problems with supervisors, which often seems to be the root to problems with mental health. First of all, especially to students who are currently based in the UK, most universities will have outstanding support structures for you to actually tap into and get support for mental health issues. Okay, I don't think you're going to get that kind of support from employers anywhere better than what you can currently get if you're a student at a university in the UK. So the first thing to do is to actually make sure that you tap into the support that is available to you, because all too often people do not, and that's part of the problem. Secondly, you need to also reflect on what is causing you the anxiety, the stress, and is it self-inflicted sometimes? And sometimes PhD students put pressures upon themselves that they don't need to. And sometimes it's about actually understanding boundaries and understanding what role or how much should the PhD take and how much of your life should the PhD take whilst you're doing it. And this also relates to some of the discussions that we had earlier about boundaries, about academia being greedy. And in the same way as PhD students can have problems dealing with anxiety and broader issues to do with pressure and mental health, in the same way they can, not all, but they can sometimes turn to their PhD supervisors as a form of therapist or counselor. And I think it's really important to note that it's like your PhD supervisor is not there to provide that kind of support. They can be encouraging, they can be supportive, they can direct you towards the right kind of service, but they're not qualified to actually provide that kind of support. And even if they were qualified, it is not their job, because it's crossing a boundary, it's crossing a line, and they should not be the ones providing you with the kind of support that you need in order to overcome mental health issues. Now, if your mental health struggles are due to a poor relationship with your supervisor, there are a number of things that you can consider. One, is it a personality thing? Do we work in very different ways? And is that just not working? So it may not be a question of process. It may not be a question of professionalism. It may just be a personality thing. And that can happen. And we should recognize that when a failure of the supervisor-supervisee relationship is due to personality issues, it's not a failure on either side. It is just a working relationship that is not working. And it is therefore the responsibility of the program, the doctoral program, to find alternative arrangements. Okay, so there are processes. Now, if, however, the relationship is falling down because of different kind of issues, so there is a question here in the chat about, what do you do if you don't have a supportive supervisor who's not helpful and so on? Well, that can actually take a number of different kind of forms, right? Not giving feedback, not actually being supportive, not doing certain things, and then it needs to be dealt with at different levels. But first and foremost, each and every one of you needs to find the courage and the strength to go and talk to your supervisor very openly and say, this is what I am told by my institution I should expect of you. And I'm not getting this from you. So maybe we can agree different ways of working so that your expectations and my expectations meet together. And I should also add that expectations of what a PhD supervisor can do and should do change during the course of a PhD. So we have an issue sometimes when PhD students get to the end of the PhD and still want the same level of handholding and support and supervision as they did in the first year. That is not appropriate. So as a PhD supervisor, I can see exactly how to fix perhaps a chapter And I can give you advice on how you can fix that. But to go beyond giving advice and say, you need to do a little bit of this, or you need to reframe it in those ways, or you need to add certain references, to do any more of that, like editing and specific detailed comments that change the structure and the actual outputs, would be unethical, because it is your PhD. Because at the point in which you actually give, there is a line that we need to draw. Because at the point in which you give feedback that reframes, rewrites, and redirects a PhD, especially in the final stages, then I actually think we're talking about co-authorship. And that will not be appropriate, because you need to own the PhD, especially in the final stages. Your supervisor may be in the room when you're defending it, but they are not defending it for you. So there might be a shift in expectations towards the end, where you want more support, and that support can be in the shape of meetings and guiding and final kind of proof, read through a version of the PhD. But it's going to be very different from the initial stages of the PhD. Now, to finally, if the problems are deeper than that, then there are processes within universities. And I know some of you might be rolling your eyes saying, yeah, but there are power structures, not everybody can complain, etc. And complain is process, complain is politics, complaint is pedagogy. We've all read Ahmed. However, from an institutional perspective, processes are there for a reason. And I think actually processes are incredibly important, because if we don't follow the process, we don't establish patterns. And if there are people who are breaching professional ethics and rules and guides consistently, we cannot actually address it from an organizational perspective unless we have a record. So I know it's really difficult on the person who brings the complaint, and you need to find mentors either within your organization or outside to support you through it. And you will need that support, but processes are incredibly important. Also, when you finish your PhD and you get a job as an academic, processes are incredibly important for you as well to safeguard yourself. And that's where the boundaries are really important, right? So if a student comes to you and has a complaint, you say, okay, actually, this is a process. Follow the process. Because the process requires an investigation. And the role of the investigation is to safeguard the interest of both parties.
Thank you so much, Roberta. This is absolutely fantastic. I echo the words of Kathryn here. Okay, we have around 10 minutes left. I still remind the audience that you can ask any questions in the chat. We have already addressed the one that we saw. And since there are not any questions at the moment, I will still ask you another question, the four of you. From your perspective, how could early career researchers or PhD students better contribute to or participate in cutting-edge research debate? Simon, yes, and then Kathryn.
It's an odd kind of question, because actually in many ways, exactly the people who are most likely to be doing cutting-edge research. I don't have time to do the kind of in-depth focused study that I could as a PhD student. The idea that I could have 3 years and a bit to sit around and think about a question, know all the literature, and work up a very focused and refined piece of output that speaks to all kinds of agendas, and you think about all the ramifications, and you're really in it. As you go further through your career, you accrue all kinds of exciting and occasionally not so exciting responsibilities. I know Roberta's rolling her eyes, but she loved being head of department, really. I'm sure she'll tell you exactly that. But just in terms of admin duties, in terms of teaching responsibilities, in terms of being involved with all the other things that are there, so I've done a lot of work in public engagements. I do things where people ask me to be part of their projects. That's all super exciting stuff. But in terms of having the intellectual space to focus on one subject, often it is those students doing their doctorates, early career researchers who are working through the kind of the next steps of their doctoral work, who are producing the best work. You know, and you know, never ever assume that just because someone's senior, their work is better. You know, the only thing I think you can say about people who are more senior is they've been around longer, and so, you know, they can remember more historical examples of you know, where things that might apply. But you know, generally there's no correlation between seniority and ability or cutting edgeness. So totally, you know, own that in the work that you do, and recognize that you are the expert. You know, when you go to your Viva, you are the most knowledgeable person in the room, or you should be. You know, your examiners aren't as invested in that subject as you are, because it's your subject. So yeah, just do that, and you know, hold on to it where you can, and recognize that that's a particular stage of your life where you have youth and vitality and vigor and vim, and you don't have all the other things crowding in on you. And yeah, that's, you know, that's what I'd say to that, is you are already cutting edge, and go for it.
I wholeheartedly agree with Simon. I remember being told when I was a PhD student by my PhD supervisors and by many senior more colleagues around me that you will never have this time ever again. You will never have so much time to spend on your research. I remember thinking, yeah, come on. And it is 100% true, because the irony is that we are researchers. That is what we are trained to do, is by doing a PhD. Yet you find yourself then in a position as you climb the ladder and as you become more senior in taking on responsibilities that, as Simon said, are sometimes very interesting, and others that are not so interesting. And my biggest struggle at the moment is protecting my research time. That's the irony I feel about all of it, is that what I'm actually trained to do is probably what I spend less time doing on a weekly basis, and where I have to be very, very strict with my boundaries, with the processes that are in place in order to protect that. So, and I wholeheartedly agree with Simon. He took the words out of my mouth that, you know, those, you know, as a PhD researcher, you are at the cutting edge of the research. You are reading the articles that are coming out thick and fast that, quite frankly, I probably haven't even looked at yet. And that is where I think working with senior colleagues, building your network, not having a self-deprecating nature of saying, oh, no, I'm not the expert, because you are. And you need to feed into that narrative from the onset. It is difficult. It feels a bit strange. I certainly struggled with that myself in those initial stages of my PhD. But again, I remember being one supervisor in particular, who was a very, very mild-mannered person, you know, told me off for saying, you know, you are the expert. You know, don't say that you're not. You know this better than anybody. You know this better than me. You know this better than the other supervisor. You know this better than your examiners. Go in there and demonstrate that, and take ownership of it from the onset. But I would say, you know, that you're all at the cutting edge of research right now. And as I say, take ownership of it as much as you possibly can.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so we have around 3 minutes before finishing. We don't have questions from the audience, so I'm going to ask you one last question. First of all, I mean, at this point, if you have any comment that you want to raise regarding any issue that you might consider relevant, please go ahead, because we are all ears for you. You know more than we do. But anyways, I had to finish. To what extent and why is it important to carry out research stays outside of your institution throughout the doctoral and postdoctoral stages?
Yeah, I think that is very much related to the issue of networking as well. I think that if you spend that time as a visiting fellow or a guest researcher somewhere, that is an absolutely brilliant opportunity to A, expand your existing network, and B, showcase the research that you're producing To take again like a personal example, the funding that I got from the Research Council of Norway that gave me the opportunity to spend time at the Arena Center for European Studies at the University of Oslo gave me the opportunity to build some very strong professional relationship and friendships as well with people working there. And I don't think I've heard any bad experiences from my colleagues and friends who spend like some time at another institution. In the overwhelming majority of cases, the visiting researchers are welcome. They have the opportunity of presenting their own research. People are curious to hear about the research that you produce, and you may have also time to think about some joint projects, joint articles, maybe special issues or whatnot. So it's when there is an opportunity that arises to have a visiting fellowship, even if it's a short one at some point, try to seize it. If you have the opportunity to do it, if time allows for it and money, obviously, go for it, really.
Very briefly, I think more other subject areas, ours is a hugely varied field in terms of theoretical approaches, in terms of just mentalities about approaching questions, and going somewhere else can be really good for making you challenge your assumptions, making you think about things in a different kind of way. And that's stepping outside of your bubble, whatever that bubble is. I think it can be really rewarding. So yeah, it's a bit like the networking. It's about getting that rounded perspective on your interests that can be really valuable.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more hands up. So since it's already 4:35, and I promise not to take up more of your time, it's time for me to say, as the Looney Tunes would say, that's all, folks. Many thanks to everyone who made this possible. First of all, to our amazing 4 speakers. I think I speak on behalf of everyone attending this panel to say that this has been incredibly helpful for all of us. So thank you very much. Please, I would like to clap my hands here for you. Also, second, I also would like to thank everybody who accepted our invitation to chair each of our panels. I mean, this big graduate forum conference wouldn't be possible without you. Third, to my fellow UIC's graduate forum colleagues who over a year ago took a step forward and volunteered to do this. And last but not least, to the fantastic people at the UIC's office, Emily, Emma, Melina, and Jana. Thank you very much for your incredible work. You have done the bulk of the work so far to make this happen. So thank you so much. Also, before finishing up, remember to have a look at the UIC's Graduate Forum Twitter account. In October, we will be organizing a doctoral training academy related to the topic of publishing. Let's see if we will be able to do it in person, fingers crossed. And there might be some events coming up in the coming months, so including a meet and greet junior meets senior graduate forum organized panel in the general UIC's conference in September. And one last thing, just before finishing the session, some of us will be doing some networking after the end of the session. So you have a tab on your left that says Live Network. There are 2 different modes. Either you can have a one-to-one with a Tinder-like matching application that will find a match for you that is waiting as well in the same room. And also there is a possibility to join more people in the breakout rooms. We will definitely be in one, or at least I will be in one. I will take advantage of the fact that I'm in South Germany and open up a big bottle of Weissbier. So I'll hope to see you all there. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's thank you.